After literal years of speculation, whispers and hopes, Kaldheim, the Norse mythology-inspired plane, is finally here. And whilst the MTG world-building team have always had an intense and practiced process for creating magic sets, there's something about Kaldheim that goes a little deeper. So, what aspects and flavour beats of this new plane will achieve glory and be retold in the Hall of the Valkyries? Welcome to Magic the Flavouring, the Magic the Gathering podcast where we talk about all things magic flavour design and lore. I'm your host, Andy Mann.
Hello, this is Nathan Cancel.
And it is time. It is time for Kaldheim. Finally.
Oh, I like that. That was good. That was swing. I like that. I was like, where is he going with this? A little rhyme. Nice, cool. Yeah, what I'm going to call this set is it Shards of Ravnica or Guilds of Lara?
It's Tarkir remastered, I think.
Right, exactly. There we go. We've got the third plane in there. Fantastic.
It was really time for Kaldheim 2 weeks ago, I suppose, because we're kind of late to the party with our reveals and thoughts and feelings. I was going to call this episode First Impressions, but we had those like 3 weeks ago with the week of metal before Christmas, I suppose, or 4 weeks ago.
Yeah, it wasn't a taste as more like a 3-course meal.
Yeah, exactly. I kind of feel like it was. We've already said this in a previous episode, like we wanted to take a break from the constant rolling out of sets and worlds and things, and we had a couple of really cool interview episodes that we wanted to get done first. And if you haven't listened to our episodes with Elena Dana and Magali Villeneuve, the two of the most prominent magic artists working today, I suggest you stop this episode, go back and listen to those, and then come back to this one. But yeah, I feel refreshed, and I am ready to take on a brand new set. And fuck, is this thing dense? This set is big.
Yeah, like I think taking a break for the new year was a really good idea anyway. Like I feel like everyone needed a breath, and then they've kicked off the year like with big time. Like they're not fucking about here. They've got everything and the kitchen sink. I think there's a kitchen sink in the set somewhere.
I wouldn't be surprised. A realm of kitchen sinks.
Exactly.
But like this is still one set. This is what I can't wrap my head around. And what we're going to be focusing on today, for those of you listening, I think we're going to stick to the thing that we finally settled on after almost a year of podcasting with new set releases, where we're going to do 3 episodes on each set. So this one will be a world building and our kind of first impressions and hypes for that world that's been created or brought back to. Then we'll do one where it's individual sort of flavour wins when we actually look at the full card gallery, and we'll talk about things like the cycle of cards that we really like, or a certain art style that's represented on paper, or an individual instance of flavour that we really liked. So that'll be like the on the cards paper episode, and then we'll do a story episode going over the Kaldheim story, because they are doing web fiction for this set, back-to-back sets with web fiction.
Boom, bitches. I know, right? Who'd have thunk it? I know. They're actually doing what we wanted. It's amazing.
They're doing the thing which they said they would do, and I don't think not to kind of have this come back on us and bite us in the arse. I don't think they're going to be doing stories for every single set, and they've already said that won't be the case. But the fact that we've got 2 sets and this one being a brand new one with web fiction, it's pretty good. So today we're going to be focusing on the world building. We are going to be looking at a lot of the information that was provided to us in the Planeswalker's Guide to Kaldheim, which are 2 separate articles on the WotC Mothership. They do Planeswalker guides for every set that comes out, every main release, even for return sets. I was so impressed with this Planeswalker's Guide to Kaldheim and how dense and how rich the world building is that I just can't help but consider this to be one of the best bits of world building that Wizards have done for a long time. So I'm happy to reference this Planeswalker's Guide, I think. Yeah,
I was reading through, and it's one of these things of where everything gets extrapolated to a point. This is going to be a point of contention as we go forwards. But everything, as I was reading, gets extrapolated. It's, as you say, for having one set and knowing so much about it, it feels like we know. And the reason I joked earlier about being shards of Guilds of Alara or whatever, it does feel like distinct set planes, which again we'll talk about in a second, but the fact that each of them has such a good identity and diversity within it, and that to me was very impressive. They've clearly put a lot of thought into transposing the real life kind of Norse mythology and making it fit in a Magic set that feels very ergonomic. It feels absolutely natural. It doesn't feel like they're pushing anything too far. Nothing's too on the nose. It's very well referenced, and as you say, like the lore is deep. There's lots to get your teeth into, and I think this is a really good set to do so, because I think a lot of people can have a lot of affinity with it. So if they make it nice and diverse, it's something we can nestle into. Imagine like a guild, if they do like the D&D book for this, for example, they've already got shitloads of lore to go into, and I can imagine them going really deep with something like this playing.
I think I've heard rumblings of certain things that suggest that we will likely get D&D book. It's interesting, right? Because this is the Viking set. The Kaldheim name has been attached to Magic for quite some time, and in fact popped up in things like the Planes Chase anthology and the kind of logo we've mentioned 100 times. This was a set that kind of got spoiled a long time ago when someone did a deep dive on some coding for Magic Arena and seemed to be able to pull a Kaldheim logo. Whether that was real or not, I'm not quite sure, but the name has been around. And the kind of Viking hype, the pop culture Viking hype, I mean, I'm literally currently I'm going to go back to it as soon as we're done with this recording. I'm on my second playthrough of Skyrim because, released in 2008, I'm kind of late to the party. Or 2018, sorry. No, it was 2008. Oh my God.
It was, it's like 10 years of Skyrim, I know.
12 years,
what
yeah.
we live
so I'm currently doing my second playthrough. Holly, my wife, is currently watching the TV show Vikings, like all the way through, and like these shows, like it's been 12 years where the kind of Viking pop culture stuff has been reinvigorated, and it has lingered. Unlike zombies, which have kind of fallen off a little bit, or cyberpunk is kind of having its zenith at the moment, the kind of cyberpunk genre again. Steampunk was a big thing for a while. I think like Viking and Norse mythology is a big deal, and especially in the West. And especially in places like Europe, where obviously this mythology and this kind of history is directly from certain countries and are very close neighbours. So in the UK, Norse mythology is something that's very tied to our own, and throughout the years got kind of mixed up and meddled in Celtic mythology and all that kind of stuff. And then in America, I know Norse mythology is a big thing. So yeah, it seems like this is a home run for what's seen visually.
Yeah, between the unfortunate ending of Game of Thrones, which obviously ablated it from most people's public view, and between like that and obviously like MCU doing things like Thor films and that kind of thing. Yeah, this is a big pop culture zeitgeist at the moment, and it's held a lot of brevity, and I think this is a really good interpretation of it. As we're going to see, like talking through everything, they've done a really good job of putting their own swing on it while still feeling, as you say, as I was reading through, all I'm hearing is dun, 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 like I'm hearing Skyrim in my head as I'm reading through everything. Like there's Draugr, for fuck's sake, like amazing. They actually call them the right word. Like they've been very faithful.
Yeah, for sure. It is obviously worth noting that a lot of the kind of beats that they hit are a mixture of kind of very true to Norse mythology beats, but also diving into that pop kind of culture view of what Vikings are. And I think what Magic has done, because this is obviously not the first set where they've dived into real world mythology so overtly. Like you have your Thyroses, your Amonkets, your Ixalans, all that kind of thing. And I think what Magic has done relatively well, and obviously any monetization of any kind of culture can, fall flat and be a little bit appropriative at times. But usually they blend the pop culture and the real world well enough that like you can still have something that's accessible whilst not being overtly cartoony. Like there are no like massive horns, like there's no horns on like everyone's helmets. Do you know what I mean? Like not every single character has a beard, and I think that's
it's not twee. They've done a very good job of not making it twee. I think this is why, like, it was also good. Even like as soon as we saw them doing using metal bands, of like sometimes the like some people might. I've seen like reactions for like the spoiler or the reveal trailer and everything. Some people are like, oh, is it a bit cringe? I'm like, well, no. If anything, like this is actually probably the best way to do it. Go gung ho, like be faithful to the way you want to integrate it into like the view of the current world. Using metal bands and the easiest port you can do so, and do it in a way that feels like legitimate. And I think they've done a great job. Again, there's no as you say, that cartoony aspect. They've taken this very seriously. They've not taken anything for granted, and they've done everything with a good degree of
sincerity.
Sincerity, thank you. That's the word exactly. They've done it. Yeah, they've done it with some with significant sincerity. So yeah, I think it's carry. I think that kind of idea is going to carry it way better than
Mm.
doing a cliche. Like if you had an actual version of Thor holding Thor's hammer, like it's not direct port. You can't look at that and go, oh yeah, okay, good, yeah, they've done that. Instead, you see them and goes, oh, good, right, they've done that. And that
Yeah.
feeling, I know that's a very bad way of me using my words to explain it, but that kind of feeling, it does make a lot of difference with how a set's received.
Yeah, reverence. There's an appropriate amount of reverence to the set.
Mm.
Cool. All right, so here we go. Obviously, this information has been out for quite a while, so I don't expect anyone to be completely like, "Oh my god, I didn't know that about this plane." But we're going to run through the kind of world building, the very sort of broad strokes of the world building, and then dig deep into it a little bit later on. So here we go. The plane of Kaldheim. On the plane of Kaldheim, we have the World Tree. The World Tree sits in the center of the plane and is surrounded by a space called the Cosmos. Within this cosmos, the cosmos monsters are born from the world tree. They were the first fruits the world tree gave birth to, and are in the form of giant creatures, or tiny creatures, as the case may be. So we have examples being Koma the serpent, which is a giant snake serpent that lives in the cosmos, and we have tiny little monsters called Toski the squirrel, which is a messenger to the gods. And these things are all direct references to Norse mythology as well. No one's quite sure how many cosmic monsters there are, or if they're all big or small, or whether there's something that no one's seen before. But these are all kind of things that live out in this cosmos space. The world tree itself holds up 10 realms, which are their own little worlds. We'll get
Mm-hmm.
onto this in a minute, but there is a lot going on here. So there are 10 worlds, or realms rather, on this world tree, and the world tree kind of permeates through them. Nathan, do you want to go through each of the 10 realms?
Yes, absolutely. So we've got basically they're split as the guilds who are kind of in Ravnica into two color combinations. So Bretagard is the green red humans. Axgard is the white red dwarves. Notvold is the green. Oh, sorry. Bretagard is the green white humans.
Yeah, that's a
Axgard
typo on
is the
mine.
white red dwarves. Notvold is the green red trolls. Immerstrom is the black red demons. Istfell, blue white spirits. Carfell, blue black Draugr, or zombies, obviously, as their creature typed here. Lityara is the green blue shapeshifter plane. Skemfar, black green elves. Starnheim, black white Valkyries, or angels, as their creature types in here. And then Surtland, which is the red blue giants.
Yeah, for sure.
10 realms. And one quick thing to mention is that there are other realms outside of the 10 in Kaldheim, but it is not yet timed for their story. It's quoted in the planar guide. So it's interesting
Yeah.
that they've chosen these 10, but there are others available out there somewhere. So maybe
Oh,
we'll come
and
back.
they want to do 3-color Kaldheim when they come back.
Oh my
to it.
god, yeah, of course, yeah. Lalara's no longer got the shards anymore, right? So of course we'll be back for later.
Exactly. So those are the 10 realms. In each of the realms' skyline, you can see several things. So they're all kind of connected physically. So the world tree isn't this kind of abstract idea. It is a very physical thing, or at least it appears as a physical entity within each realm. So in each realm's skyline, you see the branches of the world tree. And on some realms as well, you can physically go up to its roots and its branches and kind of make buildings out of them, but we'll get to that later. The world tree's aurora-like sap, which is a substance called tyrite, creates the aurora lights that are seen in each of the planes as well, and some characters that we'll talk about later are affected directly by this tyrite substance. And also in the realm's skylines are a shining sundog, which is like a glare effect, which I never really knew it was called a sundog, but in some of the sort of glacial regions you can see like kind of, it's almost like a
Tri-star effect almost.
yeah,
Yeah, where you
yeah,
have
it's
like one in
like
the
a
middle
sun
and then you get
halo.
the 2 points. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, we
Yeah.
don't get it in England because we don't have like mountainous areas, obviously.
No, but obviously in some parts of the world you do. And this
Mm.
sundog effect is in fact the realm of Starnheim, which is where the Valkyries live. And the hall in Starnheim is so bright that the other realms can see it in their skyline. There are 12 gods in Kaldheim. This is a god family known as the Scoti, or Scotty, I suppose I'd call it, and they rule different aspects. So you have things like the god of battle, the god of fear, god of death, so on and so forth. These are obviously all based on the pantheon of Norse gods, and even like their names and their kind of what they represent are very tight, sort of tightly linked, as they would be in the set. This family of gods defeated a previous pantheon, which were known as the Ainir, who supposedly became the elves. So the elves on Skemfar adhere to this Ainfar pantheon as being the true pantheon of gods, as opposed to the Scoti or Scotty who are ruling now. Travel between these realms can be achieved in different ways. So you have omen paths, which are essentially magical doorways or tunnels, which you can go through. Doom Scars, which is a violent overlapping of the realms, so when they physically cross each other, and these are much more tumultuous than the Omen Paths themselves.
Best name.
Exactly,
Definitely.
yeah. The Cosmos elixir made from Tyrite, so the sap from the World Tree can be made into an elixir, which is actually what gives the Scotty gods their power. So if you drink this substance, or if you come into contact with this substance, you can be given power enough to cross the cosmos. And then certain races have an easier time crossing this cosmos as well. So shapeshifters, because of their very nature of being shapeshifters, aren't as affected by the cosmos as other creatures, so they can physically go through this kind of open space. Omen seekers, who are essentially magical adventurers, can be given like runic ships and are aware of knowledge and magics that allow them to pass through the cosmos to get to other realms. And there is just other races kind of have different ways of doing this. But for the most part, if you were to, as a mortal, go into this cosmos and try and cross between the realms, you'd probably find yourself wrapped in madness and the endless abyss before you got to where you needed to go. So it's not something that you'd probably want to do unless you were very much prepared. And that is the kind of big broad stroke of just what is the scaffolding of this new plane. And something that really strikes me, and I don't know if you had the same experience, Nathan, but I think I tweeted this out the other day. This feels to me like how if Magic was a game that had not yet existed, so say if we lived in a parallel world, like our actual parallel world, not like a fancy one in like Magic, but and then like a Richard Garfield parallel was alive in 2021 and said to his friends, I want to create a game with an idea of a multiverse and this is how it's going to work. I think this is the game that they would create. Like it feels like this is like a reboot of just how the structure of Magic is, right?
It's a
You have
microcosm of the multiverse almost.
yeah, it's weird. Like you have your multiverses, you have your like space aspect where you can't travel between it unless you're like these
Mm.
big magical creatures. You have old notions like in sort of earlier Magic sets, the idea of a plane crossing over physically with another plane and creating like this whole new space. Or that, Dominaria was once called the center, quote unquote, of the multiverse. So they have physical relation to one another, very much like
Mm.
how the realms are presented here as being not abstract ideas of like, oh, I think there are other realms. It's like, no, look, I can see
You
it.
can
It's
see them.
there.
Yeah, exactly. They
Right?
overlap. They
It's
interact. Yeah.
literally there. Yeah, and it's just everything about this set just seems to be how like they must have had a meeting. I think I joked that like someone had a meeting at Wizards of the Coast HQ and said we want to do a new card game but about Vikings and Norse mythology, and the meeting ended up with, well, why don't we just make it a Magic set? Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like it just feels that way. And I'm really here for it. I absolutely love it. It's a little bit
Mm.
weird, but I love it.
I guess there are a lot of parallels towards like because obviously the World Tree is the representation of Yggdrasil, which is obviously the World Tree in Norse mythology, and the idea of
Mhm.
these realms. Like that's the thing within the lore of Norse mythology, there are realms that do drift across each other. If you've watched anything of the four films, they do have some aspect of
Yeah.
following the right route. There are, as I say, layering. There is portals between, and it is this idea of there are beings of stronger power that can travel between these realms, obviously gods being the parallel to planeswalkers. And what's really interesting about this is because it creates this little microcosm, this almost little world within itself. And if you read up on the planeswalker guide, there's every plane has had some like interactions between each other. Like there's some really interesting things that I'll talk about Yara, for example. But what's interesting is now we have this microcosm that has its own hierarchy, its own in-world kind of effects, and now we're seeing the effects of other interplanar beings coming and interacting with them, being say like Tybalt on the side of bad and then Kai on the side of good. Like we don't actually see a planeswalker from Kaldheim.
Oh no, isn't it Tyvar is an
Oh,
elf?
I suppose, yeah, sorry, Ty, but that's very true.
He's the
That's
only
very
one
true.
there.
Yeah, and obviously we don't know, and we don't actually know quite exactly what his role within the story is yet necessarily.
No.
We kind of know that Kai is here as a positive protagonist, and we've even seen through some sagas and stuff that Tybalt obviously has some negative and pushes the narrative to its conclusion in fucking things up as Tybalt normally does. But it is very interesting, as you say, to have this almost like this could have been its own card game, and weirdly enough, because of the amount of stuff they've fitted into it, it kind of feels like they were trying to almost do it. It feels it's strange that they've only managed to do this all in one set. That's the big thing.
Mm,
Like, this is one of the few sets I think they could have afforded maybe to do one or two sets on. Like, why is it, for example, that Innistrad going forwards to the end of the year is going to have two sets, one about vampires, one about werewolves, arguably neither of which needs a whole set about, whereas we only get one set for all of these 10 realms, you know?
mm,
And that's a curiosity that, yeah, maybe they created microcosm. Maybe they weren't sure about how people are going to react to it and how people are going to look into it. So obviously, from a lore perspective, we're big and hype into this. Other
mm,
players might not like to, and I think maybe going forward, there's maybe a criticism as it's overly complicated and it might end up pushing people away, kind of similar to Ikoria. But I don't believe that. My gut reaction is that they've done a very good job of making this world feel immersive and feel really engaging. And it's very impressive that they've done so. But yeah, absolutely, it is its own little world within a world. The first time that a plane's felt like it's got a full diversity, not just, we saw the continent of Ixalan, might not go back there again, whatever. You know, they've got like the whole fucking worldview is here. You know,
yeah.
everything.
Like I was thinking about this last night in sort of preparation for doing this episode, and I was kind of thinking like it's about the different planes that they've done and how they've structured them, and this having like different guilds, like there's no other way to call it, like it's so entrenched, having like
Hmm.
these different like races attached to colors, attached to geographical places, like is not a new thing. Every plane does this. It's just in some planes it's more important narratively speaking and gameplay wise than others. Like you couldn't imagine Ravnica being the set that it is unless the guilds and their narrative
Hmm.
personalities were hugely important. Whereas something like, yeah, you're right, like Ixalan, we know that the vampires in the set that we got in Rivals and in like the one that preceded it, they do have their own continent because we've seen it in a story, and obviously their
Hmm.
idea of being conquistadors is that they're from somewhere else. But it didn't really matter because what the story was, it was about four factions going in this one place and doing this one
Yeah.
thing. But then you say you look at something like Tarkir, where the five clans obviously have their own identity, and a lot of the conflict comes from their territories. So obviously that's the thing. But then Innistrad again is flips back the other way, where Innistrad, the different races are hugely important because obviously vampires and werewolves and humans, there's this battle. And even though they did tie those races to geographical areas on Innistrad, really, it doesn't really matter. Like the fact that Nephalia is the zombie place in Innistrad
Hmm.
doesn't hold much bearing to the fact that vampires live in Steinsia when on the cards you're just going to make a vampire deck and a zombie deck and smash them about, and it just, so some planes rely on it more than others.
Hmm.
And I just think with this one, they've done, I love it and I hate it. Like that's the
Yeah.
genuine truth. I really love it and I really hate it. I
Hmm.
love it because the way that they've done it is that they've made these separate realms with their own geography and like extensive. Like each one of these realms, most of them could be their own plane if they really wanted to stretch it out. And
That's exactly what I was thinking. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
they've given them their own colored identities and tribes or whatever. But the fact that they've made them physically able to interact with each other, and that the tribes on the plane know that they can physically interact with one another, and it's, even though they're magical events like open paths and doomscars, they're not mind-bending miracles that the people of the plane are unaware of.
Hmm.
Then it kind of gameplay wise it doesn't matter. No one's going to be sitting there thinking, but they're from different realms, they don't mix, because the point is that they do. Whereas I
Hmm.
feel sometimes, and I know I've kind of said this before, the gambit of, oh well, people in the multiverse don't know about other planes in the multiverse, makes it really clunky sometimes when you're trying to tell stories or build
Yeah.
decks and play with
Or they
them.
just accept that Ajani's just gallivanting around this giant
Yeah,
lion man. Just like,
yeah.
most planes would shit themselves at that. But nah, it's cool, whatever. We'll just put him in a metal suit. No one's going to criticize it, whatever.
I think that's
you
maybe
know,
why they make most planeswalkers human, because they can just go anywhere.
well, this is the thing. Yeah, obviously they have this. They have the perceived idea that we can only relate to things that we relate to. But then obviously within the story, that also makes sense because there's less. Imagine like an ooze planeswalker. Like that's just not. It's
Yeah.
not cool in most situations. Can't rock up to most parties and have a good time. So yeah, that makes sense. I mean, hit the nail on the head. Though this is the thing that's interesting. Like reading through. And the way they split the Planeswalker guide is interesting and something I don't necessarily agree with, because they gave Bretagard, the human realm, a whole Planeswalking guide page. It has its own 5 clans, and each of those 5 clans got specific digression on, which is good because it gives you a good point of view of like, oh, okay, so all the different human clans. But at the same time, in the back of my head, I'm like, I don't care about humans. Who gives a shit about humans? You know, I want to know more about the trolls or more about these Valkyries. Like, for the first time, we're seeing black white angels like properly done. Okay, yes, we had some in Ravnica, and we've had, say, for example, Selena, like the Dark Angel. Like, there are outliers. This is the first time we've actually had like they come in pairs. They come in Shepherd and Reaper pairs. Go and explore that. And like giants, like we've got fucking spell casting giants. You've got the ragey red ones and the smart blue ones. Let's see some of that. And that I think is my only criticism is that these some of these individual planes could have felt like, I'm saying planes, obviously planes within realms, right? Each of these individual realms could have felt like individual planes, and we could have
Yeah.
gone and experienced that in its own little isolated bubble. Again, maybe the point is give everything at once and kind of see, but then also I feel like now the issue would be going back that they've kind of rinsed all of the natural lore from the Norse mythology, and they would have to then, for better or for worse, I'm not sure how it would be, they'd have to go on their own journey and explore their own lore and create their own world, which might not obviously have as much gravity to it, because obviously it's being made up and fabricated rather than being drawn from real world things. But yeah, the fact that each of these have such individual identity is very impressive, and it makes you want to engage and invest in the plane more.
I think this was the problem they had with Theros, right? With the second time through, is that they'd done such good work on the first set, paying homage to Greek and Roman mythologies and Persian mythologies, that on the second time back, I think they still had a lot that they wanted to do, but they just they didn't quite go for it enough. Like individual cards had references, which was wonderful, but instead of focusing on the underworld or the Titans with the Theros story, I mean, whatever the story was, we don't really know. They did their own thing with planeswalkers billing around, and it's like just tell the underworld story with Elizabeth, because then that's the pool of Greek mythology which you haven't yet tapped on. Don't go and tell your own story set in this world.
Exactly.
Do the thing we want. So yeah, so maybe they will. Maybe they'll just. I mean, I think I was chatting to someone about it, and it was that we kind of felt like that they should just, if they were to ever do a return set, just tweak like one thing, like just maybe expand on like maybe some of the other realms that are still influenced by Norse mythology, or do like a different family of gods, for example. Like have like obviously we don't know what the story hasn't concluded at the time of recording, but like the Scotty could be removed by another family of gods, or whatever else is going to happen in this set. Like they could carry that story on forwards. I mean, the thing that I hate about it, because earlier on I said I loved it and I hated it. I love the fact that they've done this realm system and that it's really deep and there's so much going on. And I think they've finally cracked how to do this multiverse system, if you like, and it's still being relevant. But I hate the fact that there's now like another 10 realms that I've got to learn the names of, and they're all attached to color identities that we already have names of. I was trying to think of the fucking Ikoria triomes the
Oh
other
right,
day.
yeah. So yes, what
I was like,
Savai and
Indartha,
Indartha, yeah, but never remembered Indartha. Fuck.
Wildren.
Yeah, exactly. Like
Go on.
there's only so much brain space, you know. I mean, and this is coming from people like you and I who are sponges
Yeah.
for this kind of information. Like the average person out there, they ain't got time for this shit. I mean, and it's funny you say that, because I was thinking as I was reading through, and I'm like going, when they're breaking down Bretagard into all the different realms, I'm like, I can't remember all of this. I've got 9 other realms to get to. What's wrong with you?
Dagoth, that's it. We got that. We got the 5.
Okay,
No, this is exactly my problem. The one, I'll tell you the one that I did absolutely remember, like looking down this list before I started writing the outline and looked back over the Planeswalker guide for these realms. The one that I absolutely went, I know what this one is, and that is Immerstrom. Or Immersturm. I can never pronounce it. I know what it is.
Yeah, Immersturm, yeah.
The reason I fucking know this realm is because we called this before Kaldheim was even put on the docket for 2021. So this is like, lots of content creators do their predictions for like what they want to see in the next year, or if they know what a set's happening, what's going to be included in the set. We haven't really been around long enough to do that per se. We often go back, as I'm doing right now, and say, oh, we knew that was going to happen, but we haven't done any too forward predictions. I think we did one for Ravnica where we said where we would like the story to go, so maybe that one will be proven right later. But the one thing that we did say, and we put it out on Twitter, and it's something that me and you have been talking about, and I think it was born from a conversation with another fan as well that we were chatting with, is the idea that what if, because we know that Kaldheim is this idea with Norse mythology, what if the plane of Valor, spelled Valla, which was a plane in the Planar deck for the Planes Chase anthology. So the Planes Chase card was Immersturm on the plane of Valor. What if they folded Valor in to Kaldheim to be the kind of Nyx equivalent on Theros. So it's the kind of
Mm.
pseudo realm, but it's like an afterlife thing. Because the Planes Chase card, Valor, Immerston, was very much a direct reference to Valhalla and this Norse idea that your afterlife isn't like a heaven or hell experience as a like a Judeo-Christian idea. It's more of like a second life where you do the things you really loved or you get tormented. So
Mm.
for many, Valhalla, for a lot of glorious warriors, it's all the like saga and song telling and the endless feasts and glorious battle in the afterlife. And the plane of valor with the instance known as the Emistrum on the card was described as a plane in constant battle. So it was all thunder and lightning. It was big, massive warriors. All the warriors had like winged helmets and Celtic armor and big axes and whatever. So they were Vikings. And there was one card that actually made it into print called Warstorm Surge, which many Commander players will know because it's a very fucking good card. It's a red enchantment. And that was an actual printed card which had the Imstum referenced in the flavor text. So this card was from the Plane of Valor. Now, that doesn't mean, obviously, that they're locked into doing, right, well, we can't do anything else with this concept because, we've now printed a card on it. But the Planes Chase anthology cards, as we all know, are a testing ground for ideas and flavors that they haven't yet put into, like, proper world building. So, fucking Theros, Tarkir.
Yeah, we had Monsang and Arcos, didn't you, as planes that
Yeah.
they clearly went, right, okay, if we go... And it's funny, a question of whether or not they... I think for planes like Tarkir and Theros, they probably had this idea in their head they wanted to do this anyway, and then went, oh, have we referenced this anywhere else? And then looked back. And Monsang's probably a bit too... wishy-washy. I don't think it's quite as easy a port, but it probably gave them the inspiration to think, okay, we could definitely do a Mongolian set. What's interesting with the way they did with Immerstrom and Valor is that Valhalla is obviously not necessarily represented as a warring like field of pain and death. It's supposed to be, it's supposed to obviously be where you go to when you ascend. The Starheim of the Kaldheim that we actually ended up getting. And obviously they've looked at that and then they've twisted because obviously Immerstrom's become the demon realm. If you look at the picture on the plane chase, they don't necessarily all look like demons. So I think obviously they've transmuted their own Theros, their own ethos into the set, and they've kind of transmuted it a little bit, which is absolutely fine. But yeah, as you say, like you can put that slam dunk into the called it section for sure.
We absolutely called it because when Kaldheim got released, I found that tweet or whatever, and I reposted it being like, I think it's going to happen. And then when we got the reveal of there being 10 realms and one of them was called Immersturm, I was like, I just leapt out my seat. It was like, yeah, called it. So this is a big like smug moment for us. Like we absolutely called that was going to happen. Was it? I said it was Valor. But then they changed it to Immersturm was the name of the realm. Fine.
Yeah.
It's demony instead of humans, and although there is lightning on a lot of the concept art for the modern incarnation of Immersturm, it's a lot more fiery, but the constant battle, the afterlife-esque idea of it being other realms, the realm aspect of it being related to Kaldheim, like bang, 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 absolutely nailed it. And yeah, spent the past 5 minutes basically patting ourselves on the back, but I think we deserve that one. That was pretty good.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. And I think it's, this is one of the things I think that is maybe a slight concern is that we've had 3 sets on Ravnicus. We've got some diversity to each of the guilds and we can understand their nuance. Rakdos went from being just whips and chains excite me to being an actual cabaret kind of, not cabaret, a review kind of show. You had the whole they expanded the ethos of them, and I think they're going to do the same if they go back to Kaldheim. I'd hope that they do that here as well, because there's a lot of a big focus on and as you said earlier, like this idea of the gods and changing hands of pantheons. One of the things I think is amazing about this is they make the gods feel less ethereal and much more tangible. They're much more within the world. Like we're not going to talk about it at great length, but in the first story, Kaya basically turns around to Odin and goes, "Who the fuck are you? Why haven't you fixed anything?" And it's great because it's a point of like immersion breaking. We're like, yeah, these are just actual like they've got faults, they've got flaws. They're not all reverent like okay, Amonkhet gods weren't necessarily doing the best job because they're being controlled by Nicobolus, for example. But like if you look, say it like how the Theros gods are treated compared to how the gods are treated within Norse mythology, it is actually very well done in the fact that they've immersed them within the culture and within the realms rather than keeping them all aloof. And whereas obviously like people like Zeus and that kind of thing weren't necessarily he came down and had a little pokey poke around the ladies and made some kids and stuff, but I mean beyond that they kind of kept them separate, and this is really nice to have this. Yeah, I know I hated it as I said it, but it's too late now. But it's little things like the fact that Tybalt can come in and take the role of Valky, God of Lies, within the set, and do it and pull it off. It shows that this is an immersive plane, and everything is kind of got tangible flux. You know, the Scoti, as much as they are very strong, powerful things, none of them are indestructible. If you look at their cards and everything, like, none of them within the game are infallible. Like, they've all got their
No.
own little flaws. And that kind of thing. I do also really, really like that they managed to kind of bring the Bifrost into it. We don't see it necessarily in any of the cards beyond the Sword of Realms on the backside of Halvar, God of Battle. But I do like the idea that they kept this idea of Bifrost within the set, and it's probably going to be a linchpin of the narrative going forwards as
Well,
well.
do we think so? There is a card, and I'm looking at it now. It's a saga, a red-white
Mm,
saga called Forging the Tyrite Sword. So, as we
mm.
discussed earlier, Tyrite is this substance made from the sap of the World Tree, and it's got kind of the properties of the cosmos in it. And the Tyrite Sword hilt is a winged hilt, and it's not exactly the same as the Sword of Destinies, which is on the backside of that god card, but it is so similar that I wonder, and it's a different artist, that I wonder if the Tyrite Sword is another name for the Sword of Destinies.
Yeah, I believe it is. I think from what I can tell, there's only been one weapon forged from Tyrite within the set that we can see. It's not something they just do willy nilly. You know, I mean, I think some of the other ones like Kaldheim, the rhyme stuff, on the backside of Yorn. There we go. The God of Winter, for example. His has a little bit of a twinge in it, but I think that specifically that Tyrite blade was made and is an individual blade. I think it's what's represented in the saga. Man, not full of the, because it's what's really funny as well is that I'll talk about this in a second. Sagas within this set, holy shit, they've knocked them out of the park. Like, this is the unbelievable best place to do it. But where are you? Oh, there we go. So the Trickster God's Heist is the blue-black one, where it shows exchanging control of two creatures and then exchanging control of two non-basic, non-creature permanents. This idea of, and in the picture you can see him taking the sword from someone. And an interesting thing that I asked the artist for the Tybalt alt art, the showcase version, and I asked, is the blade that's in your in the Tybalt side, did you choose to do that? Because one of the other artists in the full art frame, like the box topper frame, also has a blade in his hand with blood on it and a figure in the background. Is that part of, was that your choice? And he said, no, I was asked to put that in. So that's clearly some aspect of the set kind of there. And I feel like Tybalt is going to have something to do with it. And I love the idea that this idea of Tybalt coming and bifrosting the realms and going, hey, not only do you have your individual realms that you could kind of kind of flex between, but you've also got a multiverse outside of this to deal with as well, which I don't think it would blow their minds quite as much, because they've got this multi realm circumstance anyway, and apparently there are other realms outside of those 10 that we haven't seen within Kaldheim. I don't think it's that far out of reaching, but I do like this idea that they created a Bifrost sword as well, and it's going to have ramifications later on down the line.
Sure.
I think.
So
Yeah.
just to run through the gods, just because obviously there's a lot of info going on here. We've got the Scotty family, Scoti. Can't settle on pronunciation.
I think
So we have
Scotty. I think Scotty.
Scoti. Whatever. We'll find out. You have Olrund, which is the god of wisdom, which is the Odin sort of analog. You have Raydane, the god of justice. Halvar, god of battle. Egon, god of death. Toralf, the god of thunder, which is obviously the Thor analog. Burgi, the god of boasting. Cosima, the god of the sea, which is the only one which is described as being an actual cosmos monster that then became a god. So that's kind of an interesting relationship there. You got Turgrid, god of fear. Valky, the god of lies, who is, and we know this from the card itself, is the god which Tybalt is directly impersonating. So on its, all the gods are double-faced. So on one side, on the creature side, it's Valky, and on the other side, it's Loki in his planeswalker form. So Valky is the kind of Loki equivalent, which Tybalt kind of drew inspiration from anyway. And Essika, who's the god of the world tree, who is the god who created the cosmos elixir in the first place. Kolvori, who is the god of kinship, and Jorn, who is the god of the weather. So yeah, we have these 12 gods, and yeah, as you say completely, they're a lot more tangible because they are literally creatures. I wonder, it's not something that I spotted in any of the world building that I've seen. I wonder if we'll see it in the set. I wonder if these were all literal, other than Cosima, mortals who then became gods.
Well, this is the thing.
That's what it kind of reads as.
Yeah, well, Essica has very little written about her. She clearly is very, very important. What's also interesting is that they've managed to fuse the gods and their weapons into MDFCs, which is
Mm.
fantastic. I think it's a good way to kind of make space and equity in the set. You know, you can get two cards for the price of one. But Essica doesn't have a lot about her and where her origin comes from. What grounds a lot of these gods is the fact that they transcend into godhood through the imbibement of this elixir. Like, they're not born into godhood. Like, they kind of took the godhood within them and it enhanced their magic, gave them immortality and all of that nonsense. Like, they're not, as we said earlier, infallible. And as we've
Mm.
seen, the Aina, the elven pantheon, was usurped by the Scotty human, well, quote unquote human, because as you say, one of them is and this is the thing, we don't have enough information about them. The little thing,
Yes,
like, for
I think
example,
in the narrative it will come out.
is there a real Valky god of lies? Probably. Would he really like the fact that someone's impersonating him? Absolutely. Is that a nice flavor point? Indeed, yeah. And it's
Mm.
those kinds of things that you kind of have to make assumptions about. And I think that the fact that we can make assumptions and it doesn't feel like we're not left with enough information makes me feel like they've done a good job of presenting them how they should be presented, without being going like, wait, so how does a Theros god, like, how does it, so when is it an enchantment? You know, like that. There's no
Yeah.
question to it. It feels right. I think Essica's the only one that creates a question to me because her other side is the prismatic bridge, and that's very clearly a very big thing. Like, the ability to create a gateway through to other planes, to other realms, is quite important. I know all the gods can do it, but clearly she has a greater affinity. Hopefully, we
Mm.
learn more about it.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think that's a good point. Halvar is the one who actually wields at the moment
Mm,
the sword of destiny, which again might be the same as the Tyrite sword. We're not completely sure yet, but he has that kind of glowing blue sword as well, so maybe he'll have a big thing to deal with it.
mm,
Halvar is an interesting one for me. Just kind of talking about the gods, then we might need to move on to some of the creatures in the realms. Halvar is the god of battle. And this isn't like a new concept. In almost every pantheon, we have like the brutish one or like the battly one.
mm,
So in the Therosian pantheon, for example, we have Erois, god of victory, and then we have the god of the slaughter, Mogis, who are two sides of the same coin of battle. They're literally brothers in that pantheon as well. We have Ronus and Hazret in the Amonkhet pantheon, who are the two kind of strength and zeal. So they kind of represent battle, even though they all kind of did because that was their deal. And so yeah, all of different sort of god pantheons in Magic have these kind of battle things, but they're always kind of portrayed as either being a little bit dim because they're not like the god of intelligence, for example. They're not the
mm,
learned ones, or they're portrayed as being like bloodlust and battle crazed. And Halvar is neither of those things. So Halvar is described as being selfless, a stalwart, unwavering, and the most sensible person in any room. And he, in some of the sagas, like the narrative of some of the sagas and myths on the plane, is often the one that kind of sees through Valky's tricks and lies.
mm.
And I really love that idea that the god of literal battle isn't some blood crazed like maniac swinging a sword, and nor is he an idiot who just kind of thinks, oh, well, I can solve anything with force. That role instantly goes to Toralf, who's the god of thunder. He is sensible and considered, and that it speaks a lot to the world building of the culture of Kaldheim, because battle and facing a glorious death and entering a courageous act is all seen as being a positive thing in different ways. So it's not necessarily about being the person who slayed the biggest monster, although that is good. It's not necessarily being about the person who took a bunch of arrows to save a friend, but that is also good. It's all of these things at once. It's not like, oh, well, you're an asshole because you kill indiscriminately or whatever. Like, doing all these things is seen as being like a sensible, courageous, self-righteous act, right? And this is something
Yeah.
I'm going to talk about the angels a little bit later on because they also embody this as well. So I just love this kind of idea that in a culture which sees battle and warfare as much of a sort of righteous and almost like friendly way of how the clans kind of work around each other in the plains, it's not
Mm.
necessarily about like conquering or destroying. It's about just living and carrying on with each other. That their god of battle is the one that in a room is the one that wants to keep things level and keep the status quo and doesn't just do things without thinking. I just think it's a really nice like little flip around, and makes
Yeah.
sense for kind of playing in the culture they're trying to explore.
Yeah, it subverts the whole big rule smash aspect. Obviously, this isn't a green red card, but over the course of the years of Magic,
Yeah,
it's
he's
very
white.
easy to
Yeah.
paint like the aggressive person as being. And it's funny, even in history, like modern history, but it's in like real world history. The best warmongers weren't the ones that were on the front battle line, giving themselves a 99% chance of having a spear through the chest. They were the ones sat in the back line, the tacticians, like
Yeah.
war and fighting is something that should take headspace. And it's good that they're identifying that. And yeah, they've made, Thor the headstrong one, which they should. And it is, as you say, the other great thing about this set is that they've painted this unapologetic way of being like, everything is for the glory of battle. I mean, in whatever fashion and way you can do it. A lot of the different races and a lot of the different nuances to the different realms have usually, if this, it was almost like, this battle didn't go well and this is kind of what happened, and it's almost like the fallout of different conflicts and who won, who lost, and what happens afterwards, that kind of thing. It's a very interesting dichotomy of something, and it does, as much as obviously the set is a set that has things like a lot of attacking, there's an even attack mechanic involved, but even then it does feel measured and considered. It's not all Immersturm, good god, everyone's fighting, kind of like Tarkir. Tarkir felt very aggressive. This doesn't feel, surprisingly, as aggressive as, say, Tarkir did.
No.
It feels, as I say, more considered, more reactive, I guess.
I think that's because on Tarkir, just as a kind of little like flavor comparison, the clans on Tarkir seem to always be under duress of being sort of wiped out. So whether that was in the Khan's realm, where sort of resources are scarce between the different clans, and that's why all the different Khans used to wage war on each other, even though they all knew they had an ecosystem to maintain, or in the Dragons timeline where they were all under the thumb of the Dragons. In this set, at least from the world building aspect, obviously, we'll find out things more as the narrative progresses, but none of the realms are necessarily under duress to be extinct or wiped out. They get like raided by other realms, or they might go to war with each other or battle each other, but they're all very much set in this world tree dynamic. So to find a courageous act to kind of make your name with isn't the same as trying to fight so you can eat. It's a different sort of thing.
There's no world-ending apocalypse on the horizon. Well, we say that. I'm looking at the
maybe
we say that. Yeah, exactly. But for the moment, we've come to a plane that's almost balanced in its world structure, and it seems to be working fine, and everyone's kind of got, there's no like elder dragon coming and usurping everything. Everyone's kind of got their place and their statement, which is obviously how sets should be. We don't want to arrive at a set and to chaos unless we've already been there 4 or 5 times and we're bored of it already. Like, you need to have a status quo set down, and the status quo seems very balanced and very well organized. So yeah,
for sure. So we kind of spoken about the gods and the general sort of realm structure. Like, what are the individual realms and races that kind of catch your eye? Because there's definitely 2 or 3 which I prefer over the others in terms of their presentation. But which ones kind of float your boat?
So I imagine you're going to talk about Starnheim yourself, so I'm going to ignore that for now, as much as I really do like that, and I'll touch on it when you talk about it. The big one that got me was I like Karfel, specifically when you mentioned Skyrim earlier. I got some serious Skyrim vibes from the Black.
The Draga of Karfel are a big one for me as well. Yeah,
really cool. What I like about them is the nuance of that they. Basically, the reason why they're all Draugr is what their king kind of turned around and went to the god of death and went, yeah, I'm happy for everyone to be turned into undead warriors without any consent. It's now like slowly losing their minds or everything. But what I love about it is they still maintain a social hierarchy. There's still order within them, which I find really interesting, because normally we don't see this in zombies. We see them, as the Liliana kind of mindless null kind of aspect to them. And so it was quite interesting to see that there is. It's one of the things I used to love about Lord of the Rings is when they go and find the undead king, and they've still got like a choice of, no, I kind of want to carry on being this spirit zombie thing. Like, I've got autonomy. Like, I'm not just your brains. And that's really interesting to me because it's not seen very often. The other one that I really like is Lityara. Not only the name is beautiful, rolls off the tongue fantastically, but I like this idea of blue green shapeshifters. A lot of the different races have history as to why they are how they are. Like, the spirits of justification, all that nonsense. The reason I like the shapeshifters is because they kind of got squirreled away and hidden. It like the realm for them was made, and it kind of hints at this idea of the gods are powerful enough to create little pocket realms. Like these the reason why we see these 10 realms is it balances 10 different 2 color combinations, right?
Yeah.
What I like is within the narrative of the story and within the world building is that some of these realms are actually a lot smaller than others. Some of them are created recently. Some of them have been around forever. Some of them predate the gods. And I like the fact that Lityara it was a little clan that was hiding away from all the conflict. And they kind of someone just created this little realm for him, shielding around with mountains all around them, and then they've got what was it, the Pentafjord Lake, which is fantastic. It's a palm. They say it looks like someone's just put like accidentally like squashed the plane a little bit too hard when they were molding it, and it's created a lake with 5 different points on it. Obviously, Penta being 5, and there's 5 fingers. I'm like, that's great. That's lovely. Plus, the fact that they no longer have a definite visual quality. The thing I didn't like about the changelings in Lorwyn or the changelings we saw in Modern Horizons is that, yeah, okay, weird amorphic blue creature with a weird face. And then when you got to Modern Horizons, it was like, okay, weird purpley gooey thing, cool. Whereas these shapeshifters, these changelings are actually changelings. They are skin changers, skin shifters. We've seen this in real world, I mean, like Native American culture, that kind of thing, this idea of being able to transcend into a spirit animal and that kind of thing. The fact that they're the only ones that can also mold themselves into the cosmos and travel the cosmos is also really interesting. Like world breaks within the world that are justified are very interesting. You know, the realms are supposed to be kept separate, so the beings that can traverse them are way more interesting in my mind.
That's so funny that so I had 3 races in my mind where I was like, these ones really speak to me. So it was going to be the Valkyrie, the Shapeshifters, and the Draga. And
Oh,
everything that you've
oh,
said
no.
about the Draga, no, it's good. Everything that you've said about the Draga and the Shapeshifters is literally everything I love about them too. Like down to referencing the other shapeshifters that we've had in Magic before, because
Oh,
I
really?
completely
Okay,
agree.
cool.
When the thing that really like strikes me about the shapeshifters visually as well, builds on this point. It's kind of rehashing what you've said, but the fact that they have these wood carved masks and kind of adornments over the top of these heavy travel cloaks, they are humanoid. They do have, you know, as well, we assume they have 2 legs and they have 2 arms and they've got a face and eyes and things, but because they're so hidden, and because they are descended from humans or humanoids, I suppose, in this realm, but they've just been given this kind of ability to skin shift. Giving these things a form which is their own makes them more mysterious and makes it more like, ooh, when you see them change into other things. Having the weird lava lamps of Modern Horizons or the Teletubbies from fucking Lorwyn, you know,
Yeah, fair.
makes if they look like nothing, then I don't want to play with them. Like this is more of a play thing than really a lore thing. I don't want to look at changeling cards. Like,
Yeah.
and this
I
is
mean,
going to sound like
Colossus is the most bizarre looking thing in the world, and yet it
it's
sounds
awful.
awesome, but it looks
Yeah, it's
terrible. It's got fucking
terrible.
appendages out of its knee and stuff, whatever. Yeah, it's like, who wants to
Yeah,
play with
like,
that?
and this is going to sound like a massive diss to a lot of people who we play with a lot of the time, and indeed anyone else who's listening who plays either changeling decks or plays tribal decks with a lot of changelings in them. As a player who likes the lore and likes playing EDH, I fucking detest shapeshifters as a changeling, as a creature type and as an ability. It's so unflavorful to me. Morophon.
It's
Oh god,
bland, right?
I'm so sorry, Morophon players. I know I've said it before. I fucking hate it, and like because it's nothing. It's just a blob.
Yeah,
Whereas these shapeshifters, you could do a tribal Kaldheim shapeshifters deck, and it would still feel like its own thing
yeah,
more than
absolutely.
almost anything else. And yeah, that's what I love about them. And again, yeah, the Draga, as you say, like the fact that they keep their intelligence and they're not mindless zombies. They have their own shit that they want to do. They want to, you know, raid other planes or other realms, god planes, to
I know
get
it's gonna
their
be hard to not do that every
treasure.
time.
I also just wanted to point out we're gonna do our flavor picks episode is when we're gonna really nail down individual cards or cycles of cards, as I said. But King Narfi, who's the king of the Draga who betrayed his human people to turn them into zombies, his creature card, he's got his crown, but his crown has got a spike that's been driven down into his forehead, and
So
I
it can't
just
be
think
taken
that's
off. That's
yeah,
fantastic. Yeah, I'm
that's
king now and forever. Good luck taking it off, bitches.
that's just so gnarly. I love it. I absolutely love it.
That's great.
The race that I really want to talk about are the Angels, or as they're known in Kaldheim, Valkyries. And for the most part, Angels are like some of the most boring creatures in Magic, because they're in every set. Like elves, I know there are elves in this set, and they're going to play a huge part of the narrative, and they're relatively interesting compared to other planes that we've seen. But elves are so not my jam simply
Move
because
elves, whatever. We've
they're
seen them in
everywhere.
every aspect of them. Cool, great.
And
Next.
Angels fit very much into that thing. And as a predominantly Orzhov player, I play a lot of Angels in my decks, and they do have some individual nuance to them. Like some of the Orzhov Angels are different, like the Boros ones and Ravnica. The Amonkhet Angels are male, and their constructs of Bolus's realm on the plane. Like, that's kind of a cool thing. But in general speaking, yeah, we get it. Warriors with wings, whatever.
Right, Mana
But
Manifest, great.
yeah, whatever. The angels on Kaldheim, the angels of Starnheim, which is the kind of glorious afterlife, with Istvel being the kind of fallen afterlife where you go if you're not courageous. But these Starnheim angels are really interesting. So their whole deal is that they're older than the gods. They don't answer to the gods, whereas many of the other races venerate one pantheon over another or whatever. The angels are kind of above all that, to the point where their physical realm, so they're sat at the top of the world tree, and in the realm of Starnheim, there is the Hall of the Valkyries, which is the big endless longhouse, which all the heroes and all the courageous people go to when they meet their end, and they can live out their afterlife drinking, fighting, telling stories, what have you. The docklands that sit on the outside of this longhouse, there are 12 ships, and these 12 ships represent the gods, because even though the gods are maybe a bit more physical, they're a bit more changeable, they are still the gods of the plane, so they still have some presence in the afterlife. But these 12 longboats aren't necessarily there to be like, hey, whenever a god dies, you can come here. They're there so that when a god dies, the Valkyries can either send that ship away to Istvel or welcome it into the dock. So it's kind of like they're still these adjudicators.
Mm.
And that's exactly what they act as in the realm. So there are two main types. They're the black-white tribe, if you like, on Kaldheim, and they act very much in that black-white dichotomy. So we have white-aligned angels and we have black-aligned angels. And this kind of picking apart one color of a color pair and assigning it to the tribes is something that we see in every single one of the tribes as well. This is something that we've not really spoken about, but they're not combined color pairings like they are on Ravnica, which is how I guess how they're differentiating it. They've split the color pairings down into their individual color identities, and having those two color identities form a bit of a kind of like a symbiotic relationship, whether
Yeah.
it's like constant battle or whether it's working with one another, depending on the race. So the angels, you have black reapers and white shepherds. And the white shepherds are the ones that if you die and you've led a courageous life, whether you've died of natural sort of like endings and you've done something courageous in your past, or whether the thing that you've done is a courageous act, you get taken by the white shepherds up to Starnheim to live out your afterlife. And the black reapers are if you are a cowardly person, or if you have done something that is an act of cowardice. They might not even wait for you to die. If you're so egregiously a loser, they'll come and take you away to Israel.
Hey, buddy, days come. It's like, yeah, fair. I've been waiting
Yeah,
for a few
exactly.
weeks.
Like, they might actively kill you. And
Yeah.
what I really like about them is that we often get sort of bogged down in this podcast talking about the kind of color philosophies of color pairings and what's the black in a character versus the blue in the same character and what have you. And there's this kind of incredibly nuanced idea that's evolved over time, over sort of like 27 years of Magic or whatever. But this is like a very stripped down, like, white is glory, black is disgrace, like black is death, white is afterlife kind of aspect. And although at first glance I was like, oh, that's kind of reductive for a very nuanced game, I actually think it's very clever, because again, it goes back to this idea that the people of Kaldheim venerate battle and glory. So the idea that if you're selfish, if you're a coward, that means that you did something cowardly on the field of battle, because to be cowardly on the field of battle is to be selfish and self-serving. So there is that black aspect, which you must be punished for. So kind of white good, black bad is maybe a bit more relevant here than I would like in Magic, but that's whatever. Whereas with white, and I was kind of struggling with this yesterday. Again, I was kind of looking at this dichotomy, and I was like, but the idea of being a selfless person in Kaldheim seems to be good. Like, you protect your shield mates, like you go into battle with your clan and you fight for the glory of your people. That's being seen as selfless and a good thing, because you're going out to be like in battle. But a lot of the characters in Kaldheim seem to be content with the idea of going off on their own to find a glorious or courageous act to do to get into Starnheim, which to my mind is like, well, that's a very selfish thing to do, because it's like that thing in Friends, right? When Phoebe gives to
They're selfless
charity.
good deeds. Yeah.
Yeah, she gives to charity to make herself feel good, But then Joey points out, well, you felt good, so it's not a selfless act. Like, you were doing it to feel good. But then I suppose that's my meta morality being placed on the world of Kaldheim, where in the world of Kaldheim, going off and finding a courageous act to only so that you get a good afterlife isn't morally bankrupt. If
Mm.
anything, that's a really good adventure that you can take other people on with you. So
Yeah,
I
as long
was,
as you bring
I,
back the story to your clan or whatever and
yeah,
espouse all the heavens to hear, then yeah, you're doing glory to Kaldheim
you're
at that
doing
point.
glory and you're making your people proud. And this is like, I really liked this. And for me, it was in this Valkyrie pairing more than any of the others. I actually quite like the slightly stripped back, like white versus black aspects
Mm.
of the color pairing, as opposed to, well, it's Orzhov. In Orzhov, this happens. It's like, no, they're white angels and they're black angels. They work together. The shepherds sometimes have to stop the reapers from killing someone if they do something cowardly, because the shepherds might believe honestly that they'll do something courageous later on, so they give them a
Chance
chance.
for redemption. Yeah.
The reapers aren't evil because they're not trying to kill everyone. It's said in the Planeswalker's Guide that the shepherds and the reapers both actively want a fair trial for a person. So
Mm.
they're not evil or good in and of themselves. They're reacting to the good and evil, or the cowardice and selflessness of the people of Kaldheim. So yeah, I just really loved it. And I mean, again, just calling them Valkyries as opposed to just angels was a way to be able to get the Valkyries of Norse mythology, who are this all-female warrior, Pegasus riding group of warriors that were kind of the army of the gods, into this Kaldheim set without having to make yet another tribe of people. They were very able to sort of smoothly make angels, who are the classically all-female presenting tribe in Magic, and put them into
Mm.
this kind of setting and make it work. And yeah, I just really love it. It's just a really slick design.
I think the thing that annoys me, the thing that's I love everything that I love about the angels is kind of what I don't like about the demons, and this is why I think somewhere along the lines of world building kind of falls not flat, but I mean, there's only so much you can do. Obviously, the fact that, as you say, they split the dichotomy across kind of for some people, like Surtland, for example, the giants. They say there's the smart blue ones and the aggressive red ones. That makes sense. You know, there is obviously nuance within that. That's pretty much all you need to know about it. As you say, with the elves, you've got the Greenwood elves, the Black Shadow elves. Shocking color choices and naming conventions, I know. One of the interesting ones is that, yes, okay, you've got Immerstrom, you've got the black demons that are more narcissistic and more sadistic, and then you've got the
Mm.
red ones who are more about fire and glory. And the fact that they don't get that definition as much is very obvious when you compare them directly to the angels, and maybe just the angels, and that I blah 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 blah, that dichotomy of having the good angel on your shoulder and the bad and the devil on your shoulder, the angel and devil on everybody's shoulder at all times, because everyone will eventually be judged. That's a really
Mm.
cool aesthetic to me. I think that's a really cool idea. And it is funny, as you say, like, this set isn't just about, oh sorry, the plane isn't just about like going out for the glory of battle. One of the nicest things that I heard is when we were talking about Axgard, the dwarven tribe, or
Yeah.
dwarven realm. It's got the white and the red dwarves. One of the nicest things about it is saying that it talks about their creativity, not just in creating their weapons, because obviously that's what Boris does, but it's also in the creating of their stories. And apparently there's this one guy, Gunnar the Breathless, who went on a 3-day unbroken, like didn't even stop to breathe, story about like his great feats and everything, and he's idealized for this idea of passionately creating stories and sagas for other people to indulge in. That's kind of the glory of the battle. It isn't I won the battle, it's I get to go and tell everyone about it. And obviously this is perfectly like linked in with the boast mechanic, this idea that every single boast card has a boast on the bottom of it if it has flavor text. Like, clearly this realm is all about celebrating your victories, you know. And yeah, I think you mentioned the Istfel, where the people that don't necessarily do anything great and glorious, it isn't necessarily hell, it's
No.
purgatory. You just go there, you lose your identity, you lose your passion. It's like one of the main things that it says when it leads into the realm of Istfel is that they just live passionless, wanton lives without any direction, which for Kaldheimians, we're coining that phrase apparently, is obviously the worst thing that could possibly happen. It's purgatory. You just go, you just blend into insignificance to the point of where then you become a swirling mass of fog with all of the other spirits that go there. Obviously, this is terrible. So yeah, I think their definition for some of these tribes and the way that they've split the colors is not only undermined like what we normally expect or subverted our expectation. You know, like having blue giants, like blue giants that are actually smart. And you're like, oh, okay, wasn't expecting this. Black berserker angels. You're like, well, I wasn't expecting this. That kind of idea is really interesting when they're still setting up a guild structure. You know, that's basically what they've done. Just done a guild structure. And even though we ragged on the elves, you get a 2-1 black berserker elf. Like freaking hell. Elves don't do that. They tap for mana, don't they? And that kind of subversion, I think, really plays homage to this set. I mean, and it's one of many things they packed into this set mechanically. I know we're not going to talk about that so much, but even things like, say, we haven't even mentioned snow yet. You know, like there's so many aspects of this play that they've managed to layer on to give it that extra flavor, that extra nuance that really, as you say, feels, once you pick apart it, you realize how deep it goes. You know, it might feel a little bit full on if you're looking at a spoiler page and you haven't paid attention to Magic for the last 2 weeks. You look at the page and you go, what the hell have you, what? You know, with everything they've put into it. But as you got it drips and drabs over the last couple of weeks, it creates a very diverse world for us to engage with. And I think part of that really does come down to, this is the most perfect implementation of sagas I think that they could have possibly done. I think from a world building point of view, having the acts and the feats of your world spoken within the histories of your people. Like, this is one of the things that was really cool about Thassa, Thassa Best's the Sea God, not Thassa Best's the Sea God, Kiora Best's the Sea God, or Elspeth Conquers Death. It's like, these are actively things that we've seen in the story, and they're spoken about already within the peoples of the plane. Like, we see, like, I mean, and this is, I'm not sure if this is necessarily world building, but little things like some of the sagas being tattoos on someone's arm or being actual wooden sculptures, that kind of thing again creates, it's not just random like sculpture thing, like fair enough, like that someone's actually gone out and made this thing. It makes it feel so much more immersive. It makes it feel much more lived in and real world, because these are the stories and things that people do. Like when the gods do the things, they become gods, and they're there for you to see. And you're like, right, I can become a god. Like, they're going to come and engage in the real world. And if I do a cool thing, like one of the first human like clan ruler ended up helping the Odin analog Alrund. Yeah, when he was facing the wolf. Man, there are so many fucking names to remember at the moment. Sarulf, we'll assume it's Sarulf, the realm eater, and he ends up helping him and fends off Sarulf at a point of where Elrond was going to get killed, and Elrond then gifts him the entire realm to rule over.
Yeah.
Like, that is so cool. The fact you can actively engage with your gods, and then they can make you king of your realm, and everything's all about for the glory of Kaldheim. Like, one of the things is Arnie slays the troll, and Arnie's card has the flavor text saying, it was like, yeah, I headbutted a troll, you should and won, and you're like, yeah, I know. There's a saga that says it happened.
You've literally been written. Sagas is an interesting one. So you're right. We're not going to talk too much about mechanics at length. So we do have Foretell, Boast, and Rune are the kind of new mechanics. Rune isn't a full-on mechanic, but it's going to be a keyword that will be important. And then yeah, exactly, yeah. And then sagas are back, and we have snow as our kind of thing. So snow permanent is going to be a thing, and we have snowlands, and it's not a mechanic. Modal double face cards are back. Obviously, we knew that was going to happen. We're going to keep those to our. Yeah, they're not. It's not really a mechanic.
Count as a mechanic. It's just 2 cards in one, whatever.
Exactly. We're going to keep those to our flavor picks episode, because that'll allow us to actually look at individual uses of these new mechanics, and we'll talk about more of them next week. But sagas, I mean, you can't really talk about Kaldheim without talking about sagas, because it's interesting that they were originally introduced in Dominaria. The Dominaria set, rather, which was, the Return to Dominaria set, 25 years of Magic. The sagas were there as a card type permanent to almost be a meta device for the game designers and the world building team to tell new players about the game's 25-year history, which for like 15 of it was all about Dominaria, right? So it was kind of an interesting device. And the name Saga was a kind of an odd choice, because obviously it's a word that evokes you telling glorious stories in a historical context. But sagas, as in like how we actually use the word on Earth in our real world, is most tightly associated with Norse mythology. So it's interesting that we saw it on Dominaria. They came back for Theros when it seemed to be a good fit there. But it's only now, like sort of 3 or 4 years later after their first introduction, that this permanent type has actually found its spiritual home on Kaldheim. I just think it's kind of a neat idea that, they didn't call them anything else. They could have called them histories, but they called them sagas. And now we're finally on the plane where sagas makes like linguistical sense. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, it's very cool. And again, it's a way of having a whole story within a card, and I know we've talked about this before, but that is really important for world building, that your cards kind of tell as much of a story as they can. Especially, I mean, okay, we're getting web fiction this set, but especially for the sets that didn't, it's as much as you can fit onto a card that doesn't have flavor text as you possibly can. Like, that's the big thing about sagas, is they say way more about the world building in the sets without having any flavor text whatsoever, because the flavor is within the card itself. It doesn't need that, oh, by the way, this is the thing that makes it relevant, or this is the thing that explains this thing. Like, it has it all there, and you can kind of engage with it yourself. So yeah, really good. I'm really glad they've done 2 cycles of them, which shows they've gone completely ham, and it doesn't feel ham-fisted. It doesn't feel too clunky. It feels like, yes, this is the kind of thing I'd expect. The entire world is built around storytelling, so that if there weren't a significant number of stories, I wouldn't believe you, you know.
Yeah, for sure.
So,
Yeah. God, this set
yeah.
is stacked. It's
And
absolutely
also, do you know what I just scrolled through? To the uncommon legends, Andy. There's a whole cycle of uncommon legends.
Yeah.
And they're like
Which
the really important characters as well. Like, I mean, okay, some of them, like, we don't know about the angel necessarily yet, but we know that Maya, Bretagard Protector, is like one of the main protectors of the entire realm. Harold is literally the king of the elves and is an uncommon. It's not even a rare. Like,
well,
that's
yeah,
how much they've put in.
King Narfi is the Dimir one. I think it's all of the relevant rulers of each of the tribes in the 2 color combinations are the uncommon legends, which again is something that they originally explored in Dominaria. I mean, we've had uncommon legends before. That's not a new thing. But having a whole cycle of them that are story relevant is something that they're bringing back, and I kind of like it. It makes narrative sense in the sort of printing of the cards way, because you want to, if you have more characters and sets that rely on storytelling as part of their world building, you don't want to skimp on the cards, otherwise people will complain. But you don't necessarily want to make them all rares or mythic rares, because then collectors and people who play the game will complain. And even for formats like Commander, because obviously that's a consideration, you don't want to pump in all these outrageously powerful commanders, like, 50, 60 of them per set. So you make some of them uncommon, you make them slightly underpowered. They're still commanders if you want to play them. They still make narrative sense in the story, and they don't necessarily ruin, standard formats, because as much as, people might complain, well, you can only like put a certain amount of them in your deck, or you can only have a certain amount of them on battlefield. Standard is a format of like 7 cards. So as soon as those 7 are found, the deck has been made, So
I think it's also important for Commander that you don't load up your legendary creatures with the most, okay, well, obviously that's the best card. Like, I'm looking at, say, Eradicator Valkyrie, for example. Like, it's got like 6, 7 different like keywords on it. You don't want that on your legend. You want your legend to be a quirky effect that can sit at uncommon, that makes not only the format more accessible, but stops every deck becoming super stacked and broken. Do something small and quirky, and it has a lot more resonance. Like, we were talking about this for Ravnica, like the uncommon legends there sometimes, and you're like, sorry, not Ravnica, legends, Commander legends, like the uncommon legends, some of them had way more nuance than the rares that did, because it wasn't just slap you about with value. It was like, okay, here's a nice little niche effect that explains their character and is more to get into from a flavor point of view than it is to say, go, cool, great, it's a 2 mana 4/4 flying vigilant first strike, guess I'm attacking with it. So yeah, absolutely. I'm glad they space out like the flavor and the legends across all of the things, because also you get to see them more often, right? That's another thing that isn't necessarily always considered, but the real world uncommons are seen more often in sets. Like, you're more likely to get immersed in the story if you see these often. If you only see if you only saw one Harold out of an entire pre-release, you'd be like, oh, cool, whatever. If you actually get him in like 2 or 3 patches, you go, wait, who's this guy? Maybe I'll go and have a look into him, especially since they do cool things, So I think it's a good way to make the story of the set, even if they don't have individual stories, more accessible and more engaging.
Absolutely.
I think I've said engaging and accessible a lot this set. Like, I've done a really fucking good job of it.
It looks like a really sweet set, narratively speaking. And I think we're literally now, with our topic of conversation, segueing into what will be our next episode, where we do our flavor picks, where we take the individual cards or card cycles of what's actually been printed on the paper, and seeing how that relates to the flavor of the set, and seeing what we think works and some things that didn't work. Re-reeler guys, like, we've been speaking now for about an hour and 15. We've barely scratched the surface of this plane. It is an incredibly well-designed plane. Obviously, they have a lot to chew with real-world mythology, but I would encourage you, not only to go read the Planeswalker's Guide to Kaldheim, which not everyone does, even Vorthoses sometimes skip it. I know I have in the past. Obviously, we're all reading the stories as they come out. So by the time our 3rd Kaldheim episode, when we talk about the stories come out, we'll have a bit more up on the stories. But yeah, I encourage you to jump feet first into this set, guys, because even though we're only going to get like 350 odd cards of it, oh god, is this where I guarantee something? This is what I'm gonna put my flag in the hill of. This will be one of the sets that we return to in the next 3 or 4 years. Sure.
Yeah, absolutely. It's also really nice to have a new set that has as much story commitment to it as they have done. Obviously, we've seen a lack of story on sets that we've already been to before, and that fail. We've seen a lot of story put into a set that we already knew quite a lot about. That kind of feels like this is a new set, a new people to get engaged with, and the story does seem to be a little bit nuts. So yeah, really really engage and go along for the ride, because I feel like they really want that. If everything I've seen over the last month has shown that Wizards are really pushing for the set to be celebratory, and of course they want to kick off the new year with a bang, considering last year was such a flop for everyone around the world, and I think that they've done it very very well.
God, if this is the amount of detail and kind of push that they're going to put into their narratives for this year to kind of make up for the slightly peeled back last year, I can't believe what's Strixhaven going to bloody be? Jeez.
Yeah, it's the little, again, from a narrative point of view, there is this big horrible monster that kind of got spoiled towards the end of the the reveal video, and obviously everyone knows the Praetor's in the set now. Don't worry guys, we will get to that, but that's the fact that they can slip that in at the end. And at the beginning I thought, fuck, that's going to be way too much to the set. It doesn't. It kind of creates, because they've created such a good world, having this kind of weird threat in the back of your mind goes, well then what the fuck is going to happen then? Because we're only just really getting into how cool the set. I mean, that idea of clearly they've got plans and they're making this year a story plan. There's obviously some projection going forwards. It's not just an isolated cool excellent story, done, dusted, move on. Like that. It's going to have some legs, so it's a good point to jump into, because I feel like it's going to have some extensive ramifications.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. All right, guys. Well, that's going to be us talking about the world building and our kind of general passionate sort of expositions about why we love this set. If you want to talk to us more about Kaldheim, obviously we'll be doing 2 more episodes, but if you want to talk to us about more of the themes that we've spoken about today, you can hit us up on Twitter at mtflavouring. My personal Twitter is at AndyManface. Nathan's, yours is
at the Fox in the Moon.
Emails go to mtflavouring@gmail.com. Do hit up our YouTube channel, guys, because we have been putting out lore shop videos, which are our roughly 2 minute and under. I say roughly because some of them are 2 minute 12, 2 minute or under. Basically, lore dumps about individual characters and cards, focused mostly around Commander. I've been using words like flavor of your favorite commanders as opposed to legendary creatures, because what they're designed to do is for people who want to play with the cards and actually know the narrative of their characters as they are on paper. It's a good way for EDH players and for Thosians who also play EDH alike to kind of get involved in their stories. We've been having a lot of fun making them and kind of shooting shit back and forth on them. So yeah, go hit them up, hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, and leave us some lovely comments in the comment section, or some unlovely comments, and I can respond with a thumbs up if you like. So yeah, that's going to be my modus operandi for dealing with griefers, is just to go cool and give them a thumbs up in the comments. I think that's probably what to do.
Cheers, fam.
Well, like, why do I get involved? Like, thankfully, I will say this. Obviously, if you're listening to this episode, then you're one of our listeners, because we've got kind of a cool community. We've had zero amount of shit thrown our way, even when we've actively courted it in these episodes. Everyone's really nice and is just up for like chatting some Vorthos stuff, which is kind of a rarity in gaming communities. So I don't suppose we will get nasty comments in the comment section, but if we do, they'll just get a thumbs up and I won't be biting, because that's how you get yourself into Twitter arguments and stuff, which I'm not really interested in.
We're not going to tell you where the thumb's going up, but you can assume for yourself.
Yeah, do whatever you want. Like, I'm just not going to take the bait. Cool. Other than that, Nathan, do you have any final thoughts?
No, not at all. I think we've said plenty. Other than keep well and keep your chin up, keep busy, stay sane. All the normal loveliness.
Oh yeah, well, normal for the years 2020, 21. Cool. All right, guys. Other than that, all that remains for me to say is thank you so much for listening. This has been Magic the Flavouring.
We'll see you soon.